So we're going to look at Chapter 6, general concepts of bone and osseous tissue. But first we're going to look at bone. Well, skeletal tissues, the first thing is cartilage. Cartilage is avascular. It's connective tissue. It's surrounded by a perichondrium, which means around cartilage. And the perichondrium, which is highly vascular, it's a connective tissue layer, a dense connective tissue layer, is what supplies nutrients to the cartilage. The three types of cartilage that we've already talked about, hyaline, elastic, and fibrocartilage, are found in different places because they have different properties. We find hyaline cartilage at the articular cartilages in the joints, at the costal cartilages, the ribs, that kind of place, cartilage of the nose, in the respiratory system, places like that. All of the majority of what we see is hyaline cartilage. We have elastic cartilage at places that have to bend. So that's really the external ear, the epiglottis of the digestive system. We have fibrocartilage any place where there's going to be high impact. So at the pubic symphysis here, in the meniscus of the knees here, there's going to be some up here at where the clavicle meets the scapula. There's another one here at the wrist where the carpal bones sit on the radius. There's fibrocartilage at the TMJ. So cartilage is a living tissue. It grows like coral. The cells secrete matrix externally. Its matrix, as you remember, is a non-living, found outside the cells. So appositional growth is the cell secrete matrix against the external face of the existing cartilage. So this is the way, say, a tree grows. With on the outside surface there is new matrix, so the thing just gets wider. Interstitial growth, it happens when it happens deep within the cartilage. Cartilage will often calcify. Calcium will start to deposit. Now it's a fallacy. People think that cartilage turns into bone. Cartilage will calcify and get hard and die and be replaced with bone. This is a normal thing, but cartilage is cartilage, bone is bone, and one doesn't turn into the other. One bone replaces cartilage. So we've already talked about axial skeleton versus appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is in the dark here. It's the skull, ribs, spinal column. Appendicular skeleton is the limbs, upper and lower limb. So bones come in a number of different shapes and configurations. Long bones are any bone that is longer than it is wide. So typically, like the femur, humerus, fibula, and tibia, those sorts of bones are all considered long bones. But so are the phalanges, because they're longer than they are wide, even though they're very small bones. Short bones are cube-shaped bones, so a lot of the carpal bones would be considered cube-shaped bones. Tarsal bones would be that. Sesamoid bones are specialized bones that are found within tendons, and they're short bones too. So they look like sesame seeds. That's why they're called that. The largest one is the kneecap, the patella, but there's others at the base of your thumb, at the base of your big toe. There are flat bones. Flat bones tend to have a curved surface. And they are flat. Irregular bones are anything that doesn't fit into the other categories. So ribs would be considered flat bones, as would be the scapula and the hip bones, that kind of thing. So, the sternum, all flat. Irregular would be like a vertebrae. So what do bones do for us? They give us support, stop you from turning into a puddle of soft tissue. They are used for protection. The ribs protect the lungs, the skull protects the brain, the vertebrae protect the spinal cord, etc. They provide attachment for muscles, so they're involved with movement. They provide the leverage for movement to happen. Those three things make sense. These three, not so much. We use them as a storage for minerals, especially calcium and phosphorus. So they really are a bank account for calcium. When we have not enough calcium, we take it out of the bones. When we have too much calcium, we put it into the bones. The bones are also the site of blood cell formation. It's called hematopoiesis. Bone marrow is that, and bone marrow is part of bone. Yellow marrow stores fat in the form of triglycerides. Those are the soup bones, the big bit of fat in the center of it. As I've alluded to in class and in a couple of other videos, there are bone markings. Everything has a name, and the names follow certain rules. Any bulge or depression or holes really become conduits for nerves or blood vessels, attachments for muscles, attachments for ligaments. They become the way the two bones fit together to form a joint. All of these things are considered bone markings. And there's some rules to it. So a tuberosity, tuber is like a potato. So anything that's kind of potato shaped is a tuberosity. It's a rounded projection. Tends to be attachment for a muscle. A crest is a prominent ridge, but it's got to be narrow. So like the iliac crest along the top of the hip bone is a crest. A trochanter is an irregular surface. It's kind of like a tuberosity except more irregular. So there's really only two trochanters. There's a greater and a lesser trochanter. Both of them are in the femur. A line is like a crest except not as prominent. So it's a narrow ridge and it's not as prominent. So the linea aspera down the back of the femur is that. The nuchal lines on the skull are lines. They're not big enough to be crests. Tubercles are like tuberosities except they're small. Epicondyles are above a joint. Epi and condyles is a type of joint. A spine is any sharp, slender projection. And a process is anything that sticks out. So a spinous process is a sharp, slender projection that is prominent. So tuberosities could be processes, etc. So they so that's a spine here because it points out. This is a tuberosity. Spinous process here, epicondyle above the condyle. There's some trochanters, etc. If the projection forms part of a joint, they tend to have special names. So a head tends to be round and carried on a narrow neck. The neck is the part below. So the head of the femur is above the neck of the femur. Any flat, smooth surface is called a facet. A condyle is kind of an oval-shaped round. A ramus is kind of a bar-shaped. It's almost like a plate. So so there's a head here because this is the neck. There's a facet here. There's a couple of facets there. The ramus is this part. Pubic ramus is big. A meatus, so these are openings. So a meatus is a canal-like passage. So it's basically a tube. Your external ear is the external auditory meatus. A sinus is a cavity within the bone. A fossa is a basin, like it's a shallow depression of. A groove is just what it sounds like, a groove. A fissure is more like a crack. It's a slit-like opening. A foramen is a round opening. A foramen and a meatus look very much the same, except a meatus is deeper. The bone is thicker to go through a meatus. So that we can look at some of these things. So all of these things are found in the skull. There's a couple of different types of bone. Bone can be dense, and so that's called compact bone. It tends to be the outer layer. It's ivory is like ivory is compact bone. Spongy bone is, or sometimes called trabecular bone or cancellous bone, is sponge like. It looks like sponge toffee. It's light, but it's strong.